In the late 1960s, a researcher named John Calhoun built what he believed was a utopia for rats. Unlimited food, unlimited water, plenty of space, no predators or scarcity or any real danger. And he just wanted to see what would happen. And at first everything worked. The population exploded, the rats thrived, and it was perfect. However, after only a few generations, things started to fall apart. Violence appeared for no real reason. Some rats became hypersexual. Others withdrew completely. Mothers abandoned their young and social roles collapsed. There were those that Calhoun called the beautiful ones. Rats that did nothing but groom themselves with perfect fur, no scars, immaculate appearance. And you would think that the whole point of looking beautiful is to attract a suitable mate. But they weren't reproducing. It was just a bunch of random stuff happening, random acts of aggression. And even though they had all the food and all the water, they were cannibalizing each other. And basically, despite having everything they needed to survive, the colony collapsed and every single rat died. Calhoun's conclusion was simple. You can give a species unlimited resources, but if you remove meaning, community, and shared struggle, it all falls apart eventually. And I think about that experiment a lot when I look at online culture in 2026. Most people are struggling financially, but psychologically and digitally, we're all drowning in abundance. There's unlimited content, unlimited options, unlimited porn, dating options, identities, stimulation. It's pretty much a non-stop dopamine drip, and somehow less actual connection than ever. Across multiple studies, young adults today have significantly less sex than previous generations. Sexual inactivity among men in their late teens to late 20s has been more than doubled since the early 2000s, rising from roughly 10 to 15% to over 25 to 30% reporting no sex in the past year. And this part matters, right? This is not a moral judgment on people. When millions of people across cultures behave the same exact way, that isn't personal failure. That's the environment. Human desire for connection hasn't disappeared, but something in the modern world is quietly making connection harder to reach. And that's where the paradox we're left with. Even though we have more options, more stimulations, more freedom, and yet less sex, fewer relationships, more loneliness now than ever. For most of human history, connection required effort. You had to approach someone, wait for a response, risk rejection, and build trust slowly. Build a propinquity. Anticipation was also another part of attraction, and friction was a part of meaning. Now compare that to today, where we have infinite choices, and there's always someone else that's just one swipe away. And when choice becomes infinite, decision becomes impossible. Psychology calls this choice paralysis. The more options we have, the less satisfied we feel choosing any single one of them, because every choice now feels like a loss of the other. So commitment becomes expensive. At the same time, technology has quietly replaced effort with dopamine. You don't need to build connection to feel a spark of attention. You just need a notification, a like, a match, a message that might turn into something, and usually doesn't. And this is what creates this constant dopamine drip without the work that used to give that effort meaning. And over time, it's basically pleasure without friction. It just rewires motivation altogether. Why risk rejection in the real world when low risk stimulation is always available in your pocket?
You look lonely. I can fix that.
Some people are now forming emotional relationships with AI as a substitute for connection that just feels safer, simpler, and completely under their control. With AI, you don't have to risk anything. You don't have to challenge your notion. And the thing is, it gives a feeling of intimacy without the risk that makes intimacy real. And that raises a quiet question. If connection can just be simulated, what happens to our willingness to pursue the messy, uncertain human version of it? Because this is the deeper shift happening underneath the stats. It's not that people stop wanting love, it's that the environment now offers cheaper substitutes that require basically nothing in return. Now, before we go any further, we need to correct something important. Because if rat utopia was only about abundance, then modern life wouldn't look the way it does. Psychologically, we have access to all the resources, all the mental stimulation, all the drugs, alcohol, tobacco, narcotics are so much more readily accessible. Even drug dealers have just gotten that much smarter. Police can't really stop you if you want to get your hands on grade A drugs. Across the world, the basic foundations of adult lives are becoming harder and harder to reach. The cost of living keeps on rising. Housing stability keeps slipping away. Careers feel less like ladders and more like temporary contracts. For many young adults, the future doesn't feel secure enough to build anything permanent on top of it. Comfort without security, pleasure without foundation, endless distractions sitting on top of quiet economic fear, and all that together, these forces just don't cancel out, they compound, and you feel like absolute fucking garbage all the fucking time. And no wonder you gotta take anxiety meds, because everything is triggering your fucking anxiety. The result is a generation that feels exhausted before even entering adulthood. Not unwilling to build, just too unstable to start. And when emotional fatigue arrives before life even opens, withdrawal stops looking like failure and starts looking like your only comfort.
Okay, let's go.
This brings us to this culture of risk aversion, where the story expands beyond dating, family, and economics, because once instability becomes the norm, an entire culture begins to reorganize itself around one central instinct, which is to play it safe. The thing is, we see it everywhere. Playing it safe socially, playing it safe creatively, playing it safe professionally. Fear of being wrong becomes stronger than the desire of being honest. Safe choices get rewarded, risky ones get punished. I mean, have a look at all the latest Marvel movies coming out. Do you see these guys taking any creative risks at all?
He almost tasted that. Num 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 num, eat it up. Go play okay, 3, 2, 1. You know I'm the hottest. You ain't never gotta hit me.
This isn't because people lack imagination, but it's just because the cost of failure feels higher than the reward of trying something new. History suggests this pattern isn't even new. Culture rarely moves in straight lines. Rather, it moves in cycles. Call this the cultural swing. In periods of stability, there's going to be a lot of edgy, pushing content. Rock and roll, edgy punk bands. That was 2000s, right? In the 90s. And then we started making fun of that. And then people started doing irony. Rebellion becomes irony. And the thing is, you see all these ironic memes poking fun of all of that. Final evolution of irony is just exhaustion. And exhaustion naturally searches for stability once again.
Welcome to the rice fields, motherfucker!
You have watched my channel at all? I make a lot of Joji videos too. In the era of Filthy Frank, where Joji was still making that skit comedy shit, that had no safety net. There was no algorithmic pressure, no brand insulation, and no guarantee of acceptance. Creators had to be raw, ridiculous, offensive, and disgusting to stand out. And that's what got the views. And that's the thing, where they had to bleed publicly. And in my opinion, that risk was exactly what made that era feel alive. Now comes the shift, where there's change in the algorithm, brand safety, sanitization, optimization. That's where risk disappears, and all you're left is with very safe content. Anything else is unprofitable. And that's the thing, where once risk becomes unprofitable, culture slowly forgets how to take it. Now, I kind of want to talk about the French Revolution for this part. In French Revolution, people were exposed to chaos, violence, topple of the French oligarchs. When chaos and violence is all around you, that gave rise to the art that emphasized order, sacrifice, and moral clarity. Before French Revolution, there was paintings like Fragonard's The Swing, celebrated flirtation, indulgence, and a playful sexuality, a kind of beauty only possible when consequences feel distant. But as the revolution and instability arrived, artists like Jacques-Louis David shifted towards rigid structure, moral sacrifice, and disciplined clarity. And centuries later, modernism gave way to postmodernism, an era defined by irony, satire, and deconstruction. And we can see that as a modern echo of this in the evolution of the internet. As much as memes are a form of escapism for most, it's also a form of art. And art never exists in isolation. Matter of fact, it reacts to the condition of the environment around it. And the thing is, when reality feels stable, art becomes dangerous, pushes boundaries, mocks authority, experiments freely. But when reality itself starts feeling chaotic, that pattern flips upside down. Now the news becomes a spectacle. Everyday conversation feels like walking on glass, and every single conversation feels extreme. And that's because reality already feels intense. Entertainment stops trying to shock us. Instead, it begins to soothe. Safe franchises, familiar nostalgia, predictable storytelling. That's not because artists forgot how to be bold, but because audience already feel overwhelmed. As the creators of South Park, Trey Parker and Matt Stone once stated, "Our show didn't just become political. Politics became pop culture. The target audience didn't change. The world did." At the institutional level, risk aversion becomes policy. Large studios chase predictable returns, broad appeals, and minimal controversy. Franchises stretch longer, sequels become safer. Eventually, risk avoidance stops being a feeling and becomes a business model. In the past, reality was orderly. Entertainment was almost transgressive. Look at crazy earlier seasons of Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Now, reality is becoming chaotic, and entertainment is getting increasingly sanitized. In a world full of uncertainty, people search for any form of control that they can find. And the safest place that is really easy to control is language. Emotional life gets translated into terminology, therapy phrases, diagnostic labels. Boundaries start replacing conversations. Protect your energy slowly becomes avoid everyone who's difficult. And that's where emotional safety gets prioritized over emotional growth, and the result is therefore this weird contradiction where everyone sounds like they're somehow more self-aware than ever. So we end up with a generation that can describe these emotions perfectly but struggles to experience them with other people, because people are withholding their most basic resources, valuable things you can share with another human being, which is your time, your attention, your patience.
You're broke! You're fucking poor!
Exclusivity becomes its own kind of status symbol because being hard to reach feels powerful. Pretending to be busy feels important, and distance masquerades as self-respect. But the thing is, most of the time, this isn't confidence. It's just ego wearing a disguise. And the social cost is very predictable from all this because withholding creates resentment. Resentment creates more distance. And once again, distance confirms everyone's worst assumptions to be true. A perfect self-reinforcing loop, because people can just say, I don't care, I stay away, people don't give a shit, and I stay away because everyone else doesn't care. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy with no fucking end. It becomes a culture where connection stops feeling natural and it starts feeling more like a negotiation between how much I'm allowed to get away with and how human I can be in this moment, and how much I'm allowing you to exist. It's all so measured, calculated, and conditional, where in the end of the day, humans are not really needing each other because we're teaching ourselves to pretend that we don't. So now we return back to Rat Utopia. The original story was about abundance, about feeding rats way too much food, way too much safety, way too much comfort, and that's what led to a collapse. Again, that wasn't really what killed the rats. They died because slowly nothing required them to rely on each other anymore. Their actions stopped mattering, contribution lost meaning, risk disappeared, and vulnerability, the very thing that binds social animals together, vanished. And what remains was not suffering, it was something quieter and far more disturbing, which is social death. Bodies still breathing with no reason to reach outwards, no reason to try, no reason to care. And this is the danger that's hidden inside comfort, just meaninglessness. Because meaning never comes from safety alone. Humans assign meaning to things together. Meaning comes from risk, effort, uncertainty, and the possibility of loss. Now, obviously from this whole video, I'm kind of coming across as if we're about to all face a mass extinction, which is obviously not the case. The thing is, humans are not rats, right? We're something that humans have that the experiment could never measure is conscious choice, free will, the ability to create meaning when none is given. And that's exactly what leads to the real conclusion this entire yap session has been about. I think the real antidote to all of this is vulnerability, bleeding as a proof of life. And this is not because suffering is good and not because pain is noble, but just because risk is the only evidence that you're ever truly participating in your own existence. To bleed emotionally because you cared, to bleed creatively because you tried, because you're not just looking out for yourself anymore. You're acting almost in opposition to your survival instincts. And that's why it's so goddamn scary. Alright guys, hope that video wasn't too extra. I thought I'll do something a little bit more from the heart. Because the thing is, every single YouTube video I've made in the past has just been like stuff that I thought is funny, or stuff that I thought is like content worthy, or just mimicking another YouTuber. But this is something I just wanted to kind of just put out just for my sake. Even if this video gets fewer views, I'm happy that I did it. So if you're watching this, cool, nice to meet you. If this gets some views, that'll be pretty cool, pretty epic. Like, share, subscribe, comment. I'll probably go back into playing a character in the next one, so stick around.
Oh shit! A rat!